My name is Ava, and the day I was supposed to meet my fiancé's father felt like stepping into another world. He wasn't just any father-in-law to be. He was a billionaire who had built an empire from nothing, and everyone who knew him said he was cold, demanding, and impossible to impress. I had heard whispers that he'd tested people, that he had driven away business partners, employees, and even relatives who failed his standards. As the daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic, I knew I could never match the wealth or polish of the circles he lived in. But I promised myself I would be respectful, on time, and prepared, because this meeting wasn't just about me. It was about the future I wanted to build with the man I loved. I held my fiancé's reassuring words in my head. "He's tough, Ava, but just be yourself. That's all I ask." With my nerves already stretched thin, fate decided to test me in a way I never expected. On my way to the mansion, rushing with my carefully chosen dress and clutching the lunch I had packed for later, I saw a man hunched on the sidewalk. His coat was torn, his hands red from the cold, his eyes hollow with hunger. People walked past him as if he were invisible. Something in me froze. I knew I was late already, but his shivering lips whispered, "Please, just a little food." I glanced at the clock on my phone, panic tightening my chest. I could keep walking, arrive on time, and prove to my future father-in-law that I was reliable. Or I could stop, give away the only meal I had, and risk ruining everything. My hand shook as I opened my lunch bag and held it out to him. His eyes lit up, the kind of light you can't fake, and he whispered, "Thank you." I forced a smile, ignoring the knot in my stomach, then ran toward the bus that would take me closer to the mansion. Every second felt heavier than the last, as if kindness had cost me more than I could afford. When the towering gates of the estate finally came into view, I was already several minutes late. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes. What if this was it, the mistake that would brand me as unworthy forever? The butler's disapproving glare as he opened the massive wooden doors only made the fear worse. "You are late," he said coldly, leading me into a dining hall that looked more like a throne room. My steps slowed, my throat tightened, and when my eyes finally landed on the head of the table, I froze in disbelief. Sitting there, no longer wrapped in rags but in an elegant suit, was the very same man I had just shared my lunch with. For a moment I thought my vision was playing tricks on me, that stress and fear had finally made me hallucinate. But no, there he was, the same gaunt face now clean-shaven, the same sharp eyes no longer dulled by hunger but gleaming with authority. And as he raised his glass of water and looked straight at me, I realized with a shiver that my fiancé's father, the reclusive billionaire I had been terrified to meet, was the man I had just given my only lunch to on the street. My knees weakened and I nearly stumbled as the room fell silent, the other guests, relatives, and staff turning their eyes toward me with curiosity, some whispering under their breath as if they too had recognized the strange twist unfolding. I wanted to disappear, to rewind time, to fix the mistake of arriving late, but I could not undo what had already been done, and all I could do was stand there, trembling, waiting for judgment. He placed his glass down, folded his hands on the table, and spoke in a voice that carried more weight than any scolding I had ever received in my life, calm but with a steel edge that left no doubt of his authority. "You are late," he said simply, his eyes never leaving mine. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak, my voice cracking. I'm sorry, sir. On the way here I stopped to help someone. It was foolish of me, I know. I should have been on time." A murmur rippled through the table. Some cousins exchanged smirks, others shook their heads as if already deciding I was unfit. My fiancé's mother lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable, but my fiancé himself, seated near his father, gave me the faintest nod of encouragement, though his jaw was tight with worry. The man at the head of the table leaned back, his expression unreadable, then asked a question that pierced me to the core. "And do you regret it?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Regret what, sir?" "Giving away your lunch." making yourself late, putting kindness above responsibility. His tone was sharp, yet something in his eyes seemed to be studying me not with disdain but with interest. I swallowed hard, my palms sweating. The easy answer, the safe answer would have been to say yes, to apologize again, to promise it would never happen. But something in me rebelled, because if I lied now, what kind of future would I be building? So I took a deep breath and said quietly but firmly, "No, sir. I don't regret it. I was scared, I knew I might ruin everything. But in that moment someone needed help more than I needed to be perfect. If that makes me unworthy, then I'll accept the consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. My fiancé's aunt let out a sharp laugh, muttering, "Naive girl." One of his uncles cleared his throat as if to break the tension. The butler raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting an explosion. But instead, the man at the head of the table smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made my stomach flip. "Interesting," he said, almost to himself. Then he gestured to the seat beside my fiancé. "Sit." My legs nearly gave out with relief, though confusion churned inside me. As I slid into the chair, my fiancé reached under the table and squeezed my hand, his fingers trembling as much as mine. The dinner began, but it was unlike any dinner I had ever attended. Silver platters carried food that looked like art, every detail perfect, but I could barely taste a thing. My mind replayed the image of him in rags, then in a suit, the impossible transformation, and I could not understand why he had done it. Between courses, he kept watching me, asking small questions that felt like traps. "What do you value most in life? Would you sacrifice comfort for loyalty? Do you believe wealth changes people?" Each time I answered honestly, even when I feared my words might sound foolish. I admitted that loyalty meant more to me than luxury, that I believed wealth tested people rather than changed them, that I valued integrity above success. The relatives snickered, some whispering that I was too simple, too soft for this family, but his eyes never left mine and I began to sense something I hadn't noticed before. Not hostility but curiosity, as though he was searching for something only I could reveal. Finally, as dessert was served, he set down his fork and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "You all think I built my fortune by trusting appearances, by rewarding polish and punctuality. But let me tell you something. Appearances can be bought, charm can be rehearsed, but true character is revealed when no one is watching." The room grew still. This young woman fed a stranger when she believed it might cost her everything. That is not weakness. That is strength. "And that," he said, his voice rising, "is exactly the kind of person I want in this family." Gasps echoed around the table. His sister protested. "But she was late. She disrespected your invitation." He silenced her with a look sharper than a blade. Better late with compassion than on time with a hollow heart. Then he turned back to me, his expression softening for the first time. "You passed the only test that matters." My chest ached with a mix of relief and disbelief. My fiancé grinned, squeezing my hand tighter, while his mother looked as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. But not everyone was pleased. Several relatives exchanged angry glances, their envy clear. I realized then that this dinner had not only been a test for me but a revelation of alliances, a reminder that in families like this, kindness itself can be a threat. As the evening ended and we rose from the table, he approached me, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting now. "Ava," he said quietly so only I could hear. "Many chase wealth, few remember what truly matters. Never lose what you showed me today. That is rarer than gold." My eyes burned with unshed tears as I nodded, unable to find words. Walking out of the mansion that night, I felt transformed. I had walked in terrified of failing, but I walked out knowing that my worth was not measured by punctuality or perfection, but by the choices I made when no one was supposed to see. And for the first time, I believed I could belong in this family, Not because I pretended to be what they wanted, but because I had been true to myself. The next morning I woke with a strange heaviness in my chest, as if the relief of surviving the dinner had been replaced by a new weight of responsibility. My phone buzzed with a message from my fiancé. Dad was impressed, Ava. He hasn't smiled like that in years. But be careful. Some of the family didn't take it well. His warning replayed in my head all day as I tried to calm my nerves, but the truth revealed itself faster than I expected. When I arrived at their estate again for a brunch gathering, I could feel the stares piercing through me the moment I stepped inside. His cousins whispered in corners, their laughter sharp as knives, while his aunt gave me a look so cold it chilled me more than the winter air outside. They no longer saw me as just an outsider. They saw me as a threat. One of them, a tall man with slicked back hair and a smug smile, approached me with a glass of champagne. "So," he drawled, "you think a little act of charity makes you worthy of this family? You got lucky. My uncle's tests are a joke. Real power isn't about giving away food. It's about taking control." His words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Maybe so," I replied softly. "But control without compassion destroys more than it builds." His smirk faltered, and for a moment I thought he might lash out, but instead he walked away muttering, "We'll see how long you last." My fiancé noticed the tension and pulled me aside. "They don't like change," he whispered, his eyes full of concern. "Dad's approval means everything in this family, and the fact that you earned it threatens them. They're going to try to push you out." My stomach tightened. I had faced tests before, but never this kind. These weren't strangers. These were people who would soon be relatives, people who had wealth, connections, and influence that I could never match. That night, as we all gathered in the sitting room, the whispers turned into open challenges. His aunt leaned forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tell us, Ava, what makes you think you can survive in this world? Do you even understand what it takes to run an empire? To bear the pressure of legacy?" I froze, unsure how to answer, but before I could speak, my fiancé's father raised a hand. "Let her answer," he said firmly. All eyes locked on me. My heart pounded, but I thought of the man I had fed on the street, the way his eyes had lit up with gratitude, and I realized that maybe I did have something to offer. "I don't know how to run an empire," I admitted. "I don't know the language of boardrooms or the strategies of billionaires. But I know what it means to care for people, to see them when no one else does. If you forget that, then all the money in the world means nothing. Maybe I'm naive, but I'd rather build something that lasts in people's hearts than something that looks powerful but crumbles when no one believes in it." The room fell silent. For a heartbeat I feared I had said too much, exposed too much of my ignorance. But then his father nodded slowly, his expression unreadable yet approving. "Well said," he murmured. That was when the real storm began. The same cousin who had mocked me earlier stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. She's manipulating you with sweet words. She doesn't belong here. None of us had to pass this kind of silly test. Why is she treated like some chosen one?" The air grew tense. My fiancé stood protectively by my side, but his father's voice cut through the chaos like thunder. "Because none of you showed me what she did. You all chase wealth, positions, and inheritance. Not one of you has ever stopped to give without expecting something back. She has. That is why she belongs." Gasps and murmurs filled the room, but I barely heard them. My chest swelled with a mix of fear and pride, knowing I had been defended in front of everyone by the very man I once dreaded meeting. But envy burns hotter when it is exposed. In the days that followed, subtle sabotage began. Invitations to gatherings were forgotten to be sent to me. Whispers of lies about my past drifted through the halls, and once at a dinner, I discovered my seat had been removed altogether, as though I was invisible. Each time my fiancé's father noticed, his eyes narrowing, but he said nothing, waiting perhaps to see how I would handle it. At first I wanted to retreat, to avoid the hostility, but then I remembered his words. Never lose what you showed me today. So I stood taller, endured the glares, and refused to let cruelty erase kindness. One evening, as I walked through the estate gardens to clear my head, I found the same cousin waiting for me near the fountain. His voice was low, threatening. Leave now, Ava. You don't understand the games we play here. This isn't about kindness. This is survival, and you don't belong. Fear clawed at my throat, but I steadied my voice. If surviving means becoming like you, then maybe I don't belong. But I won't walk away from the man I love just because his family doesn't approve. His sneer deepened. Then you'll regret it. He stormed off, leaving me shaken. But as I looked up at the night sky, I promised myself I would not let fear dictate my choices. The real test wasn't just winning over my fiancé's father. It was holding on to who I was in a world determined to strip it away. The tension in the mansion reached a boiling point the following weekend when the entire family was summoned to the grand hall for what was supposed to be a simple family gathering. I sensed something was wrong the moment I entered. The air was heavy, conversations hushed, and eyes turned toward me with a mixture of disdain and anticipation as if I were stepping into a trap. My fiancé squeezed my hand reassuringly, but even he seemed uneasy. His father sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his presence commanding as always, but his gaze was sharper than usual, as though he too sensed the undercurrent of hostility swirling through the room. His sister, the aunt who had mocked me before, cleared her throat and stood with a thin smile. Since Ava is determined to become part of this family, she began, her voice sugary sweet yet venomous underneath, we thought it only fair to reveal what we've discovered about her. After all, honesty is essential in a household like ours. My heart pounded in my chest as she lifted a stack of papers dramatically and spread them across the table. Debt records, she announced. Her father struggled with money, her family nearly lost their home, and she herself has no financial stability. Tell me, how can someone like that possibly be fit for this family? She will drain us, she will take advantage, she will ruin everything. Gasps echoed across the hall. Some relatives leaned forward eagerly, eyes gleaming with triumph at my supposed disgrace. My cheeks burned with shame, not because of lies but because of the cruel exposure of private struggles. My family's hardships had always been a source of quiet pride for me. We had survived, we had endured, but here they twisted it into a weapon. My fiancé immediately stood, his face flushed with anger. That's enough. You have no right. But his father raised a hand, silencing him. The room held its breath as his piercing eyes turned to me. Is it true? He asked, his voice steady but heavy with weight. For a moment I wanted to shrink into the floor, to deny, to escape. But then I remembered the night of the dinner, his question about regret, and the power of honesty. So I lifted my chin, my voice trembling but clear. Yes, it's true. My family struggled. We worked long hours to keep our home. We learned to live with less, to share what little we had. And yes, I don't come from money, but those struggles made me who I am. They taught me resilience, compassion, and strength. If that makes me unworthy in your eyes, then so be it. But I will never be ashamed of where I came from. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the shuffle of papers as his aunt sneered and slammed her hand on the table. See? She admits it. She doesn't belong here. That was when his father stood, the force of his presence silencing even the boldest voices in the room. He walked slowly to the center of the hall, picked up the stack of papers and studied them for a long moment. Then, without warning, he tore them in half and let the pieces fall to the ground. Gasps erupted again, but this time from shock. His voice thundered through the hall. You dare use hardship as a weapon? You think wealth is the only measure of worth? Let me remind you all, when I built this empire, I had nothing but an idea and the will to fight for it. I was poorer than she has ever been, and it was those very struggles that made me who I am. If you cannot see that, then you have no place lecturing me about legacy." His words struck like lightning. Faces paled, whispers died, and even his most arrogant relatives fell silent. He turned to me, his expression softening ever so slightly. "Ava, you have nothing to prove. Your honesty is your strength. And let it be clear to everyone here. She will not be driven out of this family." Relief flooded me, but the battle was not yet over. The cousin who had threatened me near the fountain slammed his fist on the table, his voice trembling with rage. "This is madness. You're letting her manipulate you. She's playing the innocent act while she climbs into our inheritance. You can't see it, but we can." His father's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Careful," he warned, his tone icy. But the cousin pressed on, emboldened by his anger. "No, I won't stay quiet. This family belongs to those of us who have earned it, not some outsider who fed a beggar and thinks she's a saint." The words hung in the air like poison, and before I could respond, his father spoke with the kind of finality that silenced all further protest. "Enough. If compassion, honesty, and courage are flaws in your eyes, then perhaps you are the one unfit for this family. Wealth without character is a curse, and I will not allow this house to be poisoned by envy." The cousin's face turned red, his mouth opening to argue, but the weight of his father's authority crushed any further defiance. Slowly, reluctantly, he sank back into his chair, seething. My fiancé pulled me close, his hand warm and steady on my back, and I realized the tide had shifted. The hostility was still there, burning quietly in the eyes of some relatives, but the line had been drawn. For the first time, I felt a fragile but undeniable sense of belonging, not because I had proven myself perfect, but because I had refused to hide who I was. And yet, deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The resentment I had seen would not vanish overnight. There would be more whispers, more attempts to undermine me. But now I also knew something I hadn't before. I wasn't alone. My fiancé stood by me, and more surprisingly, so did his father. And with that, I realized that this was not just a test I had passed, but a war I had been drawn into. A war not for wealth or status, but for the right to stay true to myself in a world determined to reshape me. The days after that confrontation in the grand hall felt deceptively calm, as though a storm had passed, but I quickly realized it was only the eye of the hurricane. On the surface, the family smiled, attended dinners, and carried on as though nothing had happened, but beneath the polite words and forced laughter I felt the simmering hostility directed squarely at me. My fiancé reassured me every night, telling me his father's support was all that mattered, but I could see the worry in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't long before the subtle attacks began again, sharper and more insidious than before. At a charity gala, one of his cousins deliberately spilled red wine on my dress, feigning clumsy apologies while others snickered. At another gathering, a fabricated story circulated that I had insulted the staff, painting me as arrogant and entitled. I knew it was a lie, but rumors have a way of spreading like wildfire, and soon I felt the servants' eyes on me, cold and distant. What cut deepest was not the cruelty itself but the precision of it. Every move designed to isolate me, to make me doubt myself, to push me to the edge until I broke. One afternoon, while visiting the family library, I overheard two aunts whispering. "She thinks she's special because she fed a beggar," one sneered. "Mark my words, she'll embarrass us all. We just need to wait for her mistake, and then we'll bury her." My hands trembled as I clutched the edge of a bookshelf, the words echoing in my mind. They weren't just waiting, they were planning. That night I confessed my fears to my fiancé, my voice cracking. "They won't stop, will they? No matter what I do, they'll twist it against me." He held me close, his voice fierce. "Then we don't play by their rules. We stand together. Dad sees through them and so do I. You're not alone. His words gave me strength, but part of me still felt fragile, unsure of how much more I could endure. The true breaking point came during a weekend retreat at the family's mountain lodge. It was supposed to be a bonding trip, a chance for everyone to relax, but I could feel the trap closing the moment we arrived. The cousin who hated me most hovered nearby. His smile too wide, his tone too smooth. That evening, after dinner, he suggested a hike the next morning. A simple walk, he said with false cheer. Nothing too difficult. Even Ava can handle it. His jab stung, but I agreed, sensing that refusing would only give them more ammunition. The next morning we set off into the woods, the air crisp, the path steep. At first it was manageable, but soon the trail grew treacherous, rocks slick with dew, branches clawing at our clothes. My fiancé stayed close, steadying me when I slipped, but the cousin darted ahead, calling back mockingly, "Keep up if you can." When we finally reached a narrow ridge, my stomach dropped at the sight of the sheer drop on one side. Fear prickled my skin as I realized how dangerous it was. Suddenly the cousin turned, his smile sharp as a blade. "Tell me, Ava, still think kindness will save you here? Or do you finally see that in this family, only the strongest survive?" Before I could respond, he deliberately shoved a loose rock with his foot, sending it tumbling toward me. I stumbled back, my breath catching as my foot slipped near the edge, but my fiancé grabbed my arm just in time, pulling me to safety. Fury exploded in his voice. "What the hell are you doing?" The cousin feigned innocence, raising his hands. "It was an accident. She shouldn't be so clumsy." But his eyes gleamed with triumph, and in that moment I knew he had hoped for the worst. When we returned to the lodge, shaken but unharmed, my fiancé reported what had happened to his father. The old man's face darkened, his expression harder than stone. He called a family meeting that evening, his voice booming with authority as he addressed them all. "I warned you once not to mistake kindness for weakness. Now I see some of you would rather see blood spilled than accept change. Let me make this clear. Ava is part of this family. Any attempt to harm her is an attack on me. And if you think I won't cut you out of this house, this fortune, this legacy, try me." His words struck like thunder, and I saw fear flash across the cousin's face. But I also saw something else. Defiance, a dangerous glint that told me this battle was far from over. Later that night, as I stood by the window watching the snow fall, my fiancé wrapped his arms around me. "They won't stop," I whispered. "They'll keep trying." He kissed my temple gently. "Then we'll keep standing. Together. And every time they push, we'll show them that love and integrity are stronger than greed." His words settled into my heart like a promise, fragile but unbreakable. And though I knew more storms were coming, I also knew that I would face them with the same choice I had made on that first day, to stay true to myself, even when no one else believed in me. In the weeks that followed the Mountain Lodge incident, the hostility retreated into shadows, but I could feel it pressing against me like a storm waiting to break. On the surface, the family behaved with impeccable manners, polite greetings and forced smiles, but beneath that thin layer of civility I sensed something darker, a plan brewing. My fiancé grew more protective, rarely leaving my side at gatherings, while his father watched the others with eyes that missed nothing, though he said little. It was during a grand charity gala hosted at the mansion that the storm finally struck. The evening glittered with chandeliers and silk gowns, journalists snapping photos, donors mingling, a night designed to showcase wealth and influence. I had been asked to help welcome guests, a small honor that made me feel, for the first time, like I might truly belong. But as I stepped onto the marble staircase to greet arriving dignitaries, a murmur rippled through the crowd. A journalist held up a glossy magazine, and there, splashed across the front page, was my face under the headline, "Gold Digger or Saint? The Controversial Fiancé of Billionaire Heir." My breath caught as I scanned the article hastily. It painted me as a manipulative outsider, claiming I had staged the homeless lunch encounter for attention, that my family's debts were part of a ploy to climb into fortune. Quotes were twisted, private details distorted, and worst of all, there were fabricated emails suggesting I had bragged about trapping my fiancé. The room buzzed with whispers, eyes turned toward me, some with pity, others with contempt. My hands shook as I dropped the magazine, my heart shattering under the weight of humiliation. I turned to my fiancé, his face pale with fury. "This is a setup," he growled, grabbing the magazine. "Someone fed them lies." And in that moment I knew exactly who. My gaze swept across the hall and landed on his cousin, standing near the bar, a glass of champagne in hand, his smile sharp and triumphant. The realization hit me like ice. This had been their plan all along, to destroy me not with physical harm but with reputation, to make me untouchable, so that even love could not save me. The whispers grew louder, donors shifting uncomfortably, journalists circling like vultures. My fiancé's father rose from his seat at the head table, his towering presence commanding silence. He took the magazine, his eyes scanning every false word, his jaw tightening with each line. Then, with a voice that shook the hall, he addressed the crowd. "You dare to slander under my roof? To poison truth with lies?" His eyes blazed as he looked around at his family, his voice cutting like steel. "I know who fed this filth, and I will not allow my family to be torn apart by envy and deceit." Gasps filled the room. The cousin's smug smile faltered as his father strode toward him, thrusting the magazine into his chest. "You think I wouldn't recognize your schemes? I built an empire watching men twist truth for their gain. Did you think I'd be blind to my own blood doing the same?" The cousin stammered, his face pale, but the elder's voice rose like thunder. "You forged these lies, planted them in the press, tried to destroy the woman who showed me more integrity in one act of kindness than you have in your entire life." The hall was dead silent, every guest frozen as though witnessing a trial. Then, in a move no one expected, my fiancé's father turned to the journalists. "You want a real story?" he said, his voice cold and deliberate. "Here it is. The truth. I disguised myself that day as a beggar, and Ava, without hesitation, shared her meal with me. She did not know who I was, she did not seek gain. She showed compassion when no one was watching. That is character, and that is why she belongs here. Write that truth if you dare." The journalists, stunned, scribbled furiously, cameras flashing. The cousin sputtered, "You can't prove." But his words died as security stepped forward at the patriarch's command. "Escort him out," his father ordered. "He is no longer welcome in this house." The cousin's protests echoed down the hall, but no one moved to stop the guards. My legs nearly gave out from the rush of relief, tears stinging my eyes as my fiancé wrapped me in his arms. "It's over," he whispered, his voice breaking. His father returned to the center of the hall, his gaze sweeping over the room. "Let tonight be a lesson. Wealth is nothing without integrity. Family means nothing without loyalty. And Ava," he said, turning to me with unexpected warmth, "has given me hope that this family can still remember what truly matters." The guests erupted in applause, the journalists capturing every word. And though I knew the wounds left by envy would not heal overnight, I felt something shift irrevocably. The mask had been torn away, the truth laid bare. And for the first time I stood not as an outsider but as someone accepted, protected, and believed. Later, as the night ended and the last guests departed, I found myself standing beside the patriarch on the terrace, the cool night air wrapping around us. He looked out over the gardens, his voice softer now. "You passed every test, Ava, not because you were flawless but because you stayed true to yourself. Never forget that in this world of masks, sincerity is the rarest treasure of all." My eyes filled with tears as I nodded, unable to find words. And in that moment I realized something profound. The battles I had fought were not just about gaining acceptance into a powerful family. They were about learning to hold on to who I was, no matter how fiercely the world tried to strip it away. In the days after the gala, the mansion felt different, quieter yet heavier, as though the walls themselves were processing what had happened. The cousin who had schemed against me was gone, his room emptied, his name spoken only in whispers, and though part of me pitied him, I could not forget the look in his eyes on that mountain ridge, the satisfaction when he thought I might fall. His banishment was not just a punishment but a boundary, a signal that cruelty had no place here. For the first time, I walked through the halls without feeling like an intruder. The staff, who had once eyed me with suspicion, now greeted me warmly, some even apologizing softly for believing the rumors. My fiancé held me close everywhere we went, his love louder and prouder than ever, and his mother, who had stayed silent for so long, finally took my hand one evening and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up. You've brought something back to this family that we lost a long time ago." But it was his father's change that struck me most. The man who had once been described as cold and untouchable now spoke to me with a gentleness I had not thought possible. He began inviting me to walk the gardens with him in the mornings, asking my opinions not just about business but about people, about what mattered to me. One morning, as the dew sparkled on the roses, he said, "You've reminded me of who I was before all this wealth hardened me." Somewhere along the way I began testing everyone because I no longer trusted anyone. But you showed me that trust is built in small acts, unseen by the world. That is a lesson I had forgotten. His words stayed with me, not as flattery but as a reminder that even the most powerful can lose sight of what matters, and that sometimes it takes an outsider to hold up a mirror. Of course, not everyone accepted the new order easily. Some relatives still bristled, their envy simmering beneath polite smiles, but they no longer dared to challenge openly. The boundary had been drawn by the patriarch himself, and crossing it meant exile. I understood then that acceptance in this family did not mean universal love. It meant holding steady in the face of division, staying true when others twisted themselves in bitterness. That realization freed me. I no longer sought to please them all. I no longer feared their judgment. Instead, I focused on building bonds with those who wanted peace, strengthening the love I shared with my fiancé, and honoring the trust his father had placed in me. The wedding, when it came, felt less like a ceremony of wealth and more like a quiet triumph. As I walked down the aisle, I saw faces that once glared at me now softened, if not with affection, then at least with respect. My fiancé's father stood at the front, pride shining in his eyes, and when he gave me his blessing, it was not in words alone but in the unspoken promise that I had been tested in the harshest ways and emerged stronger, not harder. That night, under the glow of lanterns and laughter, I thought back to the moment it had all begun. The cold sidewalk, the hungry man in rags, the choice that seemed so small but had changed everything. A simple act of sharing, done with no witness, had opened the door to a future I had once believed impossible. I realized then that the greatest battles are not fought in grand halls but in quiet moments when no one is watching. When the easy choice tempts you but the right choice calls louder. And though I knew there would always be challenges ahead, I also knew I carried within me the strength of that choice, a compass that would never fail me. Later, as the night wound down and the guests drifted away, my new father-in-law raised a glass in a rare toast. "To Ava," he said, his voice steady and proud. "May we never forget that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not a liability, and that integrity will outlast wealth every time." The room echoed with applause, and my heart swelled with gratitude and peace. In that moment, I understood that revenge had never been the point, nor victory over jealous relatives. The true triumph was living without regret, holding on to who I was in the face of every attempt to break me. And as I looked at the man I loved, at the family that was slowly reshaping itself around us, I whispered a silent vow to carry that lesson into every step of our future. To choose kindness, even when it costs, because that is where true strength lies.